The town awoke to a bone-chilling wind and ominous clouds. And without warning, a 12-foot high wave rose up from the ocean and crashed across Beach Avenue, carrying pieces of the boardwalk across the street and through the shops. The town was in shambles, and it was only the first of 5 storm surges. For 3 days, each high tide brought mountains of thundering ocean that repeatedly swamped the town. Just offshore, Navy Commander Norman Bohan and his crew of sailors battled that same wild ocean to keep their destroyer, USS Charles R. Ware, afloat. It was an unforgettable time for those who lived through it. It was the perfect storm. The sun and moon moved into alignment, causing abnormally high tides. The moon's orbit brought it to its closest point to Earth, further adding to the higher tides. While these celestial bodies were moving into position, a huge storm that covered most of the western Atlantic Ocean began working its way up the coast. It packed 55-mile-per-hour winds. When it reached the mid-Atlantic region, it ran smack into a high-pressure system moving down from Canada. It became blocked for 3 days. The first hint of this convergence of forces in Cape May came with the high tides on Monday, March 5th, when the low-lying areas of the town experienced some minor flooding. By high tide on Tuesday, flooding was worse. Huge waves crashed on the beaches. Without warning, the residents of Cape May found themselves in the midst of the storm of the century.
We heard that there was a nor'easter coming, which was no big deal in Cape May. We're used to nor'easters, and everybody went to bed, and the wind was starting to blow a little, but no big deal. Nor'easter's coming. Well, we got up the next morning and all that had changed. Froggy Hollow was flooded. The back of Convention Hall had been torn away. The boardwalk along Beach Drive had been lifted and put into the houses that faced Beach Drive. You have to remember back at that time, there was no seawall, no retaining wall, and the water would literally just come across. I got up and I had to wade across Columbia Avenue. It was only about knee deep then, and I went up to the firehouse, and all the guys had come and like, shit, we're in trouble here. we got a big storm. Beachfront is devastated. Debris all over Beach Drive. You couldn't get down Beach Drive.
Each time the high tide came in, it would flood the streets adjacent to my Indiana Avenue home, so that I was more or less marooned on an island there. Of course, because we have the beach service business, my husband was very concerned about our beach frame tents that we leave the frames up all winter long. Early in the morning, before the tide started to rise, he hurried down to the beach to check out the equipment. And he said it was, swirling around the ocean, would swirl in and take a chunk of sand out and a few of our frames with it, and he would try to retrieve them before they went out too far.
The Ware had just been completely rebuilt. Virtually everything above the main deck was new and untested. The scuttlebutt among the old salts was that she might be top-heavy. Nonetheless, she sailed out of the Brooklyn shipyard and down the Jersey coast to Norfolk without incident. She was scheduled to perform exercises with aircraft. However, Washington ordered her to sail back up the Jersey coast to locate a Navy tug that was lost in a storm.
So, true to form, we cranked on 25 knots and headed north. What had happened is a destroyer being towed by this tug lost its tow, and it came ashore up here in Jersey. So I guess when they were, somebody asked the Navy, what's going on?
The beach?
Yeah, and they couldn't get a hold of the tug. They called on us to go to try to find him. On the way up there, we're doing 25 knots, and 3 large waves came out of nowhere. And we started to cross them. We went over the first 2 and through the second one, and that slowed us down. We started seeing life rafts and other jetsam and flotsam in the water, and we knew something big was happening. We checked the life rafts for people and didn't find anybody in any of the rafts. And about that time, we got another immediate message that they found the tug. He came in up here in Earl, New Jersey, through the inlet there. He picked up the telephone and called Washington to let them know what was up. He'd lost all his radios. We had one of the worst squall lines I ever saw showed up on the radar scope. We passed through this squall line. The wind shifted from the northwest at 30 to the northeast at 50, and just continued to get worse for the next 3 days.
There was a call from the Kearns on Beach Avenue at 8:15, and she said, we thought we'd ride it out, but we're getting scared now. The boardwalk's beating our house in the front, and we want to get out of here. So I had been on the lifeguards for 2 summers at that time, and got a lifeguard boat, and we got in it and we started rowing down Jefferson Street. As we were rowing down here, we could see the waves were rolling up Jefferson Street here. It was strange because we were used to going through the surf on the beach, but now we got waves coming up Jefferson Street. But we knew where 815 was. So when we got here, we talked about, you know, you can take a wave head on with a lifeguard boat without too much problem, but when you take them broadside, you start to get a little anxious. So anyhow, we got here at Stockton Avenue, came in the back of 815 Beach Drive on Stockton Avenue. I guess at that time, it may even been the high tide, because they were petrified that now they wanted to get out. So we got the lifeguard boat, we rode up, and we saw them at the back window. Now this is the second floor window. That house sits very low. If you go down Beach Drive and look at 815, it sits just like 1 or 2 steps off the ground. So we got to the back window and they were there, and we took them out. But the surprise to us was they had 2 big dogs that apparently they were like their children. We can't leave the dogs. So the dogs had to go with us in the lifeguard boat, and we got Blanche and her husband into the lifeguard boat, and we rowed them back to safety and evacuated them.
Well, when the water started breaking over the bulkheads and inundating the whole beach area, then we knew we were in trouble. But we had no idea it was going to be that high for 3 days. We thought at least maybe 1 high tide, and then it would kind of subside, but it didn't. It just kept getting worse each time.
The water was up pretty high. In this area here, I would estimate back in Froggy Hollow, in these low spots, the water was anywhere from maybe, I'd say, at least 5 feet, if not 6 feet high, maybe 7 in some of the lower areas.
The reason that the ride was so bad was there were a whole series of wave trains coming in from different directions. One wave train would build on top of the other, and that's why, the normal wave heights were running, say 40 feet, but then you had a 40-foot wave right up on top of another wave, 40-foot wave, and then all that water just cascading down, tons of water just falling down under gravity's fall. People living, you know what happens.
I remember throwing up one time. I got seasick, threw up, and after that, never got sick again. And the water, the forward gun mount got ripped up from the main deck, flooded the mess decks and chief's quarters, and the ship just laid on its side and shook. And you're thinking, is it going to come back or what? You know, it's laying there, then it comes back and it goes the other way.
We had as many people in the engine room as we could tolerate, but just in case somebody got injured down there, because there was so much stuff slapping around, you could chain something down and it just broke the chain. So we were sticking stuff in the bilges so it would stay down in the bilges below the deck plate so it wouldn't come up and hit us. They're ripping lockers off the wall. It was terrible.
So when you shut a hatch and you expect that hatch to hold the ocean back, we found out real quick that we didn't hold that hurricane back because it was leaking in just about every hatch we had.
The yard was the one that's supposed to have done all this hatch work and everything. They just didn't have the manpower to complete it in time.
But I mean, I never seen so much water in all my life coming up back and forth in the bilges.
And how did the water get down to the engine room? Was that the same thing?
Basically, that was from the air intakes.
Oh.
We had vents on deck. Water would come right down those. So you'd be standing under a vent, you're gonna get wet.
I watched another time and I saw the inclinometer around 60 degrees on a port roll.
It wouldn't bother me too much if we went to the bottom. Anybody would have had some relief.
Beach Avenue or to the boardwalk, and there were stores all along there, and they were all taken down during the storm and pushed into here, into the Lafayette.
So everything from across the street was over here.
Came this way, yes.
So what did it look like? Was it just
all debris, lumber, sand, and etc. And it just had to go someplace, so this is where it came. And the sand was all across Beach Avenue. Of course, in here, and all the debris was on top of it.
The ocean surges broke Beach Avenue into huge chunks of asphalt that look like they've been heaved up by monsters from below. The waves completely demolished 13 blocks of the city's 15-block boardwalk, never to be rebuilt. Several large pieces of the boardwalk wound up several blocks inland, like these on Ocean Street. The entire beachfront was a disaster area. But to many, the greatest loss was their beloved 1917 Convention Hall. The surges ripped away all but 30 feet of its dance floor and destroyed its fishing pier. Its baby grand piano was found 2 blocks away.
Most people, I don't think, realized how bad the ship was beat up until we set sea detail coming into Norfolk.
Right.
And and that's when everybody went.
Well, I'm sure the day.
Was that the first time you went outside?
Oh, yes.
For me, yeah.
Yeah.
It's, once they started flushing and started cleaning up, and then, things. And everybody that had been out says, ooh, what a mess, And went out and we looked at the one little piece of the motor whaleboat still hanging up there, just totally smashed. Everything was just gone.
The sea is unforgiving.
That's right. What amazed me is the power of the sea to rip steel out of a deck. These stanchions were welded in like you wouldn't believe. Yeah, that was 2-inch pipe. And cables, a 1/2-inch cable was gone.
It was March 9th when the sun finally came out, and the Cape Islanders began to survey their damage. Wreckage and deep sand was piled high, but they rolled up their sleeves and began putting their town back together again. After all, the summer season was only 3 months away. President Kennedy declared the area a disaster zone, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development granted the city $3.5 million to rebuild its shattered beachfront. The city's Public Works Department demolished the wreckage of the old convention hall and built a much less ornate convention hall. They replaced the boardwalk with a stone seawall and mounted an asphalt promenade on top of it. They never replaced the fishing pier, the boardwalk, nor the boardwalk shops. When the summer visitors arrived in 1965, they found a new convention hall with a small boardwalk built around it, a promenade under construction, and just enough beach to sit on.
It really changed the town because now we had to build not only a seawall but a retaining wall, and then of course in between they filled it in with macadam, and now we have our promenade, which has lasted a long time and is really, everybody thinks that's normal for us, but it was really the storm of '62 that changed that.
The Admiral Hotel at the far end of Beach Avenue had been abandoned and demolition was being considered. However, Reverend Carl McIntyre, a fundamentalist minister from Collingswood, had long been interested in the building. He drove down to Cape May just to see how badly the town had been damaged. And when he saw the crippled Admiral with tons of sand in its lobby and bowling alley, he thought the price might be just about right. McIntyre paid $300,000 for the hotel and organized a work party of parishioners to begin the cleanup. 600 of them showed up with shovels, brooms, and buckets. He renamed it the Christian Admiral and operated it successfully throughout the 60s and 70s as the Cape May Bible Conference, adding over 30 years to its life. Subsequent owners did what the Ash Wednesday storm failed to do and demolished the hotel in 1996. Charles R. Ware limped into the Norfolk Navy Yard to lick its wounds. Its fresh paint had been blasted off, and its topside gear, including the lifelines, had all been washed overboard.
As I recall, didn't we get razzed by the other ships when we came into Norfolk because we didn't have any paint on it? Yeah.
The Navy put the ship back together, and she sailed the seas for another 14 years, distinguishing herself in the Vietnam conflict. Finally, the Navy declared her surplus and fired a missile that struck her amidships and sent her to the bottom, something the great Ash Wednesday storm had failed to do. But the sailors who navigated her through that storm will never forget those 3 days of hell.
But I knew right then we was on a good lady.
She held
Charles
together.
R. Ware was, yeah. If he can hold together on that hurricane that we went through, that thing would hold together for anything.
Anyway, this was the ninth worst storm of the century, and Ware's experience in it. Ware came through, and
We're still here.
we're still here.
Captain saved us.
But we made it. And every winter now I go down to the Long Beach Island on the Jersey Shore, just about that time if I can, to look out at the sea.